Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
From that time on, after Peter confessed that Jesus was the Messiah, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord. That must never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. For you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. And Jesus told his disciples, If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his reign. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. Last week we began thinking about the 12th chapter of Romans, Paul's comments on how people are to act or how they are to be as Christians. And so we begin this part of it, the second part of chapter 12, when he says, let love be genuine. Let it be non-hypocritical. Let it be authentic, is what he is saying. And if you recall, he started the whole discussion last week by saying, be a living sacrifice. Now if you recall, and maybe we didn't say it specifically, but last week when we're living sacrifice, that means you go up on the altar. That's where sacrifices are placed. And you give yourself to whatever you're doing as a living sacrifice. In this case, to God. So I'd like you to think about it for a second. Think that you're not a Christian. And you come up to someone who you know is. And you say, explain Christianity to me. What do I have to do? And the person says, well, all you have to do is crawl up on the altar and be a living sacrifice. How many would you take the bait? Or let's look at it another way. Ask the same question to someone else, and the person quotes Jesus and says, deny yourself. Pick up your cross. Lose your life for my sake. How many of you would buy in if it was said to you that way? The interesting thing is, it did happen. It did happen in early Christianity at the time that the Acts of the Apostles were being written, and after that. People saw Christians who were denying themselves, picking up their cross, losing their life, being a living sacrifice, and doing a lot what Paul said, and these people said, we want what they have. Because they were free. They were free for service to God and others. They were free to love. And what the people saw was a genuine love, an authentic love, as people gave of themselves for others. The unfortunate part that happened is that Constantine decided that Christianity was to be the state or Rome's religion. And it was an excellent example of what happens when politics and religion mix. Because what happened was the power structure took over, and things like losing your life, denying yourself, picking up your cross, being a living sacrifice was no longer appropriate. And it got kind of pushed aside. Now, I'm not going to kid you. Being a living sacrifice, denying yourself, picking up your cross, losing your life is not easy. And it's not fun. Sometimes it's forced on us. Now, we talked about what it was to be a living sacrifice last week, an oxymoron, because people at that time only knew what sacrifices were, that you killed them or you burned them. That's what a sacrifice was. But I can only tell you what I perceive denying, picking up your cross, and losing your life is about. From my personal experience. And each one has to sort that for themselves. But denying yourself, for me, is to remember that you are the product of both nature and nurture. You were created in God's image. You were created for a purpose. So was I. We are all created to be loving people of God. But I'm going to tell you something that maybe you've never thought about. And it may shock a few. We all come from dysfunctional families. If you don't agree, just think about it. Somewhere there's been dysfunction. And those things that we have learned are tapes that play in our head all the time. And what we do is what we've been taught. We have either been taught by our parents, we have been taught by our neighbors, we've been taught by the culture, we have been taught by even the church. And there's not what Christ is sharing with us, not what Christ is asking us to be. So to deny ourselves is to recognize who we are, both our shortcomings, our character defects, and the gifts that God has given us, as Paul shared with us last week. And sometimes that can be very painful. That can be very hurtful within ourselves as we work through these things, these issues that have become part of our life. Picking up the cross for me is to live life on life's terms. To live life on life's terms is to recognize what life throws at us. Not God, but what life throws at us. Now, right now, it's easy for me to say because I'm having part of the most joyful part of my life. And I know many in this room are struggling with issues and situations that affect people physically, affect relationally, affect other ways. But there were times in my life that it wasn't joyful, to say the least. And I found out, either in reflection backward or at the time, that during those tough times and accepting life on life's terms, and I picked up my cross, I found the one who really picked up a cross. The one who died for me, who died for you. The one who loves us so tremendously that he was willing to give his life so that we may be one with God. For me to lose my life, you've probably heard me say before, life is not about me. It's about God. I have a tough time with that. I like life to be about me. What I want to get, and I don't want to lose what I have. But life is about God, and if I can picture that in some small degree, I can know where I fit into God's plans. And God begins to reveal to all of us where we fit in, what His purpose for us is, and what He is calling us to do and to be. And even if we are not in the type of situation we like to be, there is a purpose. As Martin Luther said, the charwoman on her knees is as important as the monk on his knees praying. And so we are all called by God, and sometimes we get directed into ways that we don't like, but in the same token, we have an opportunity to share the love of Christ with other people. Let me give you a couple challenges that we have. One, a personal experience. In my first call, the church council was out to get me. By the way, they succeeded. But I was at one of the council meetings, and just before that, the church monthly newsletter had come out, and I had placed an article in that newsletter. I thought it was thought-provoking, and it might give us something to think about. One person thought otherwise. And in that council meeting, took a scathing review of what that article was about. Now, most people, if not all, knew I put it in there. But the only comment made was, whoever put it in, you know this. My normal reaction is to lash back. I can argue well. However, this little voice in my pea brain said, shut up, Ed. Don't say a word. And next to me was my mentor and the editor of that newsletter, who I also noticed didn't say a word. And so she was kind of supporting me by her quietness. Funniest thing happened. What could have turned into a half an hour diatribe lasted 2 minutes. It was over. And nobody ever said anything. That's not returning evil with evil. The other thing is, I'm in the midst of reading a book called Tangible Kingdom, or I was in the midst. I stopped reading it before I got finished. The first part was excellent. The person who's an author is what they call a church planter. Starts new churches. And he was describing many of the people who do not worship, who are not part of a community of faith, for all kinds of reasons. Their own reasons, perceptions, and also those of the church. And he was going through the explanation of how he was discovering all this. And then he came to the part of how to respond. I didn't hear or read one comment about the Spirit or God. This is how he did it. And this is how he was suggesting the readers do it and I do it. Now I know me. And I know if I do what he says I do, I probably won't be able to do it, but if I can, guess who's going to get the credit? Me. And I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. There are so many things out there in the church that says you've got to do this or you can do that, and you do it and you try to do it, and it's not who God made. Or you don't come to God first and say, God help me. Give me the power. Recognize that life is about God, not about me. So as we think about what Paul said today, listen to some of the things. Let love be genuine. Ain't love great? what is evil. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Live peaceably with all. Never avenge yourself. And the kicker at the end, if your enemy is hungry, feed them. And if they're thirsty, give them something to drink. I don't know about you folks, but I can't do that. I'll try, but I'll blow it. I have to come to the cross. I have to recognize that I need to be open to be a living sacrifice. I need to deny myself. I need to pick up my cross, and I need to lose myself for the sake of the gospel. And then there's a chance that some of these things Paul says may come to fruition, and I will experience the freedom of serving, the freedom of loving, the freedom of caring, and the freedom of being at peace. Ain't love grand?